Well, good morning and welcome to Elevenses. I'm Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training. We seem to have frozen again. Ah, good lord. Let me know if you're hearing the audio okay. The video appears to have just restarted after its slight pause there. It's show number 347. It's Sunday the 2nd of July. It's not a bad day out there at the moment, and we have quite a lot of news for you. Sad story to start with. A bike belonging to a retired nurse on a charity ride was stolen and then set fire to. Technical tests are being reimposed for French bikers. That has been a back and forth story. The advertising watchdog has rather interestingly banned e-car ads for misleading claims about range and charging facilities. We'll look at that story before the end of the show too. We'll also take an in-depth look at Triumph's new baby 400s and the Buell Super Cruiser. Oh, I forgot to put that story into the show. All right, we'll have to leave that till next week then. Before we'll finish off, of course, with the final one. I've been looking at a program called Collision Plot. I've actually put Crashplot up in the preamble, but it's actually Collision Plot. And what I've discovered about crash locations, hopefully, will be quite informative. Might actually surprise you a little bit and scare you a little bit too. Right, so that's what's coming today, minus the Buell story, which, as I say, I've unfortunately forgot to put up. Kevin says okay on both platforms. That's good news. Right, okay, so excellent. Nice to see you, Kevin. Right, so don't forget then, let's crack on with the news and see what we've got today to talk about. The first thing I just want to mention is to say a big thank you to everybody down at Kent Advanced Motorcycle Group, including Sarah, who set the meet up for me. I popped down there on Thursday to deliver a talk, and it was a hopefully very successful one. I certainly seemed to get feedback from people who were at the talk. So that was the one I was delivering, Crash Course, which is about the 3 standard bike crashes, junctions, overtakes, and on corners. And there was a good turnout of bikes as well, which was pleasant, and there were around 100 people in the Kentagon itself, so pretty packed in there. I think the talk was pretty well received, even though the presentation it kind of does challenge the idea that more skills are the answer to safety, and that the idea of advanced skills is actually not always entirely successful in preventing crashes, and that I pointed out from the IAM's own data from a recent survey. So if you actually are interested in your own rider presentation, do drop me a line. I'm more than happy to put something together for a group or a club, even a small number of buddies who maybe want to do something on Zoom. I can always arrange something like that. So, right, on with the news then. First thing first, just be aware of the weather. When I was actually starting out writing the current news a few minutes ago, it was actually a beautiful morning. It's actually clouded over now. It's due to be reasonably warm, top temperature about 21 in the south and east of the country. But if you are out on the bike around the northwest, do be aware. Anywhere from North Wales right through northern England and in Scotland, watch out for heavy rain and strong winds too. It'll start to come in mid-morning in the far west, and it'll spread right across the area into the evening. There's a very strong Atlantic breeze at the moment, which is bringing heavy rain and thunderstorms, driving it along. The Western Isles are likely to get the worst of the downpours and the winds, but the storms will extend right across the central belt of Scotland later. And there's even an outside chance of rain in the far southwest of England, where it will also be windy, so do bear that in mind. The weather could deteriorate quite nastily if you are out today on your bike, so bear that all in mind. Right, okay, so on with the actual news items today then. First one first, discovering a bike has been stolen is always a pretty hard blow for anybody who's been a victim. It has happened to me actually in the past. But it must be particularly tough to deal with when you're actually raising funds with your bike. You're doing something useful for a worthy cause. And this, unfortunately, is what happened to Mary Dean, a 68-year-old retired paediatric nurse. Now, she'd set off on June the 10th from her home on the Lizard in Cornwall to ride to the Shetland Islands in Scotland, so about as far as you can possibly go in the UK. And she took part in the annual Simmer Dim motorcycle rally. I've never heard of that one, I must be perfectly honest. And she won a prize for the female rider who travelled the longest distance to reach the event. Perhaps I should head up there maybe next year or something and try and it'll be a match for my trip down to Invercargill, which is the southernmost rally in the world. Now, her aim was to raise funds for the Cornwall Air Ambulance and the Lizard Football Club, her local social club. But 9 days later, on her return home to Cornwall, she stopped at the Premier Inn in Washington, which is near Newcastle, and sadly her Intruder VS800 Suzuki was stolen, along with a 4-foot tall Tigger, which was apparently sitting on the pillion seat, and it was stolen. She reported the missing bike to Northumbria Police. Photos went out on social media. They went viral through the biker community, as well as the wider community in Newcastle and the Lizard too. And the next day the bike was actually found by a Sunderland City Council worker, unfortunately, because he'd been tasked with removing a dumped and burned out bike, and he recognised the machine from the images that he'd seen already online. Now, Miss Dean, who had to finish her journey by train, said, "I'm devastated. I've had that bike since 2011. I've been everywhere on it, and Tigger's been with me." And she went on to say that he even has his own little passport. But she did praise the biking community for putting the word out and trying to find her missing bike. The council worker, one Paul Hartley, he said he personally went out to the site where the bike was found to try to retrieve anything that had been left behind. And he did manage to rescue some of Miss Dean's items that had survived, including a singed pin badge, which apparently was of great sentimental value. The club which issued it is no longer in existence, and he got in touch with her, and they have all been sent on to her Cornwall home. A Just Giving page has also been created to help continue her mission to raise funds for the Lizard Football and Social Club, and they've got a target of £2,000. And of course, anybody with information should contact Northumbria Police. Right, so don't forget, if you want to catch this show, it goes out on Wednesdays and Sundays. It goes out at 11. Occasionally I'm a minute or two late, as I was this morning. Very rarely it goes out as a recording, and even more occasionally I miss a show altogether due to other commitments. But if you yourself aren't able to turn up on time or miss a show altogether, the place to head really is my YouTube channel, youtube.com/survivalskillsuk. Don't forget the all-important UK at the end, where you can find all the shows in their own channel. And for example, today I'm on the third in-depth item of 3, well actually 4, because there's going to be one to follow it. If you missed the first 2, then head over to YouTube, watch the previous 2 shows, and you'll see exactly what it is I am talking about. It'll make a lot more sense if you've got that context. Anyway, let's move on rapidly. Now, the EU has long had legislation which has required roadworthiness tests for 2-wheelers, but compared with most of its European counterparts, there are other exceptions like Ireland. The French have been very slow to introduce them. Now, despite protests by riders' rights organisations, a government decree was passed in August 2021, which would have seen these mandatory control technique examinations introduced by 2023. But by presidential order, this was repealed in July 2022. Now, President Macron's ruling was actually challenged in the highest administrative court in France, which is the Conseil d'État. That was back in October, and the court overruled President Macron, and they said that the decree had to be reinstated. So, move forward to the 1st of June this year, the court gave the government 2 months to implement the decree. They're obviously dragging their heels there. So 3 weeks later, the government did announce finally that the test would be phased in from January 2024. Now, older bikes registered before January 2017, they will be the first to require testing. New motorcycles will only require their control technique test 5 years after the vehicle's first registration, and once they've caught up with the backlog and got everything tested, then it'll be 3 years, rolling 3 years. Now the test will be mandatory for all two-wheeled vehicles with an engine equal or greater to 125 cc's. The test will cover all areas of control, safety, air and noise pollution, according to France's Transport Ministry, but they will be greatly simplified compared with the current tests faced by cars. No price yet announced, but expected to be around €50. Now, there is a consultation which is continuing over whether or not these CT tests should actually cover all two-wheel vehicles, i.e. that means bringing in mopeds and the sort of up to 125cc bikes into the fold, as it were, as well as bringing in three-wheeled vehicles. And this is because they say smaller motorcycles have a higher accident rate and can be a source of major air and noise pollution in towns. That's the French government ministry. Although I would say two things about this. Statistics actually suggest relatively few bikes crash as a result of mechanical failure, so I'm not quite sure how that would help. But it's interesting that they actually say that small machines are a source of major air and noise pollution, because if you recall last show, I was talking about the IAM's claim that small motorcycles actually aided environmental cleanliness. So there is obviously different ways of looking at the same kind of data. Now, so expect more demonstrations basically about this ruling, as if France hasn't got enough trouble in that direction at the moment. But frankly, French bikers really do feel a bit hard done by on this, and should they? One thing they also get is a very significant scrappage scheme with financial assistance up to €6,000, or a maximum of 40% of the price of the new electric vehicle, which is aimed at modest income households, and it's available to motorcyclists who ditch their bikes in favour of an electric vehicle. So quite a substantial carrot there to get riders switching to electric motorcycles for commuting. So, right, okay, on with the news. Now, in other news, it's not surprising that councils are continually looking to raise money, and one of the sources that they've identified, although it won't bring them much, are motorcycle parking bays. But I think what's obvious in all the debates about whether or not motorcycles should pay for parking or not, of course motorcyclists say they shouldn't, councils are beginning to say they should, it's the lack of engagement between the two groups. The councils never seem to engage very well with motorcycle community, which means of course the motorcyclists get angry about it. Now, back in February, you may remember, I covered it on this show, Islington Council sprang some previously unannounced parking charges on bikes parking in the borough's dedicated motorcycle parking bays, and the new charges applied to bays which were previously free. But the interesting thing is the way the council worded the change in the legislation. They said it was a change to existing parking charges. Now, that allowed the council to bypass any need for a public consultation on this new charge. Not surprisingly, there was a bit of protest about this. The Save London motorcycling group got involved very quickly indeed, and MAG got involved in March. And the argument about the lack of consultation largely, at least partly, revolves around the idea that it was a change to existing charges. I suppose you could, in theory, say that there is a charge, but it is a charge of nothing. For example, I have just managed to get my 250 registered as a classic historic vehicle, and I still have to pay vehicle excise duty on it. But the thing is that the amount I have to pay is actually recorded as £0. So I have to take my paperwork off, and do the paperwork, and back comes a charge of nothing, but it is a charge. And of course, what that means is it makes it easy for the government, in this case, to actually introduce a charge. Now, but it's this lack of consultation, isn't it? Mags say there was no contact from Islington Borough Council to any of the motorcycle organisations about the new charges before they were introduced, and that there was no public notification in the press, for example, of the council's intention to begin charging for motorcycle parking, nor did they bother to put up notices in bike bays to say that, you know, in the future you would need to pay for bikes in those bays. And in fact, what happened was simply that the signs actually went up in the bays, and you know, the motorcyclists only discovered they had to pay when those signs went up, or if they failed to spot the sign, having been used to parking there for nothing for years, when they returned to their machine to find a ticket stuck on it for £80. So the scale of this problem has actually been revealed in local press. By the beginning of April, 2 months after the introduction of the charges, no fewer than 1,201 motorcyclists had been issued with a ticket, so that's just a couple of months, compared with 320 for the whole of 2022. So there's clearly a fairly serious issue there. Now, Save London Motorcycling has said that after the backlash, the council agreed to remove a £1 a day charge if you were an Islington resident and you already had a motorcycle parking permit. In other words, you could park in one of those free bays for free if you already paid to park outside your house. There were also statements that the council had agreed to waive the tickets previously issued, but the group say that people who have paid fully for the fines have not yet been refunded. So it now appears that after this hiatus, while they try to sort it out, it seems that the charges are now back on and they're being enforced again, but again without anybody being told that this was going to happen. So the precise rules are moderately complex, as they usually are these days. Basically, this is how it works. ICE bikes are subject to a £1 a day parking charge, 50p a day if you're an electric motorcycle owner. But as I explained, residents who pay for a valid motorcycle parking permit, £61.20 a year for an ICE bike or £30.60 for an electric motorcycle, do not need to pay for a bay. Now, non-residents, you can do one of two things. You can order a register for a non-resident motorcycle permit, but that has to be done through the company Ringo, and that allows you to park from periods from a week, which is £4, £2 for an electric bike. There's a month as well, or you can go up to a year and pay for £110 or £55, and with that you can park in any available motorcycle bay where there is space. So you're not fixed to a single bay where you may turn up and find somebody else has actually nabbed a spot and you can't get in. Now, I know there'll be those that say £1 a day isn't much to pay, and frankly it isn't, not for a one-off stop, but it soon adds up, of course. And there'll be others who I know will be saying, listening to this, it's not bothering me because that's London. But the fact is, it's a precedent, and this is the thing, isn't it? Once imposed in one location, other councils will follow. Look at the number of people who scoffed about the ULEZ zone in London and said doesn't bother me because it won't happen here. Well, it has in a surprising number of cities. They're springing up everywhere, and the same will apply to parking. Once the charge is set somewhere, it'll be appearing somewhere else. And the other thing is, of course, once you set the precedent for paying for parking, there's nothing to stop the council raising it as well. So what seems cheap at the moment could get more expensive soon. Okay, so another area where we've had some serious disinformation is the electric cars and their range and speed of charging and just where you can charge them. And the UK's advertising watchdog has actually banned campaigns by 2 car firms for exaggerating all these elements. Now, Toyota claimed that its BZ4X model What a catchy name that is. Could be charged to 80% in about 30 minutes using a 150 kilowatt fast charging system, and that drivers could easily find these rapid fast charging points in a number of public locations, especially in areas, quote, where drivers were most likely to need them, which include obviously main roads and motorways. Now, Hyundai ran a similar campaign, which included ads on its own website, a digital billboard in Piccadilly Square in London, and a YouTube film featuring footballers from Chelsea, all promoting its Ioniq 5 model electric car. Now, this campaign claimed the vehicle could be charged from 10 to 80% in 18 minutes using a 350 kilowatt charger under the logo, making electric easy. So what happened? Well, people bought the cars and then found they couldn't get them charged up in the times claimed, and both companies subsequently admitted that the figures were achieved under perfect factory test conditions. And also the claims about the availability of the rapid charge points were also challenged. At the time of Toyota's campaign, there were just 419 rapid 150 watt chargers at 134 locations across the UK, 7 in Scotland, 2 in Wales, none at all in Northern Ireland, and only 37 of the ultra-fast 350 kilowatt charging locations. So, in their defence, the companies claimed they weren't actually misleading anybody because it was unlikely, they said, that drivers would need rapid charging points on shorter journeys, and they could always use the more widely available slower charge points, and that most drivers charged at home anyway. They also argued that the potential charge times, by promoting them, it allowed them to address issues including obstacles to customer take-up, such as range and charge anxiety, and a lack of awareness of the rollout of charging infrastructure. However, the ASA said that they were basically telling porkies here, giving misleading impressions about the straightforward nature of charging cars quickly, and their campaigns were both banned, and they were told not to mislead consumers about charging times in the future. I suspect that'll sound a bit of a warning to the builders of electric bikes too. It's long been said by people who have bought the bikes that their range and that is exaggerated, and the charging times generally take longer than claimed. So perhaps we'll start seeing more real-world data than lab data from the future. Right, okay, so on to possibly the most exciting development for a while in terms of new bikes, and this is the new Triumphs. Now, I announced those on Wednesday morning. It was just a few hours after the bikes were unveiled, apparently here in London, although I've no idea where, possibly the bike shed, although it's not actually said anywhere that I can find. But anyway, as I explained last time out, these long-awaited lightweight bikes are designed in Hinckley in collaboration with the Indian manufacturing giant Bajaj Auto, and as I explained last time out, there has been a long gestation period for this bike too. It's seen it grow from a 250 through a 350 to the final 400cc. So there's the pair of the bikes out on the road. They'll be available in just a few days' time in India, but we're going to have to wait till next year here in the UK. So, as promised, today's show, I'm going to give you a little more information about the machines. Now, to start with, the platform is new from the ground up. Powering the machines is a brand new 4-valve, double overhead cam, fuel injected and liquid cooled 398 single cylinder engine. It's called the TR series, which is a reference back to Triumph's past. It's Euro 5 compliant, apparently exceeds Euro 5, so presumably it's been built with Euro 6 in mind, which may or may not arrive before electric bikes take over. It's in a sensible state of tune, I would say. Claimed 40 PS peak power, that's just done 39.5 horsepower, 37.5 newton meters peak torque. Now that should give the bike, my guesstimate, depending on the gearing, of top speed of around 105 to 110 miles per hour. So it's not going to set the world alight, but it's going to be perfectly capable of running with fast traffic on the motorways. Now, whether it really needs a 6-speed gearbox is another matter. My old XBR 500, which had very similar kind of performance figures, whoops, that's not what I wanted to show you. Why have we got that there? Is debatable. As I say, the 5 speeds was plenty for my XBR and my NX650 Dominator too. Now, so this is the close-up of the engine. The slimline radiator does its best to hide itself over there on the right, tucked away just in front of the down tubes. The machined fins on the powder-coated all black engine, they sort of pay homage to the old air-cooled bikes, as does that finned header clamp on the exhaust pipe, and the classic Triumph triangular exhaust side casing there as well. So there's lots of styling that says Triumph all over the bike. Now, rather less attractive in my opinion is that sort of chunky exhaust system, which leaves the cylinder head a bit of an awkward angle really to avoid the radiator. Normally it would poke out between the down tubes, but the radiator means it has to be skewed out sideways, and it does make it look rather vulnerable to damage in a spill. Actually, there are optional crash bars upper and lower, which might be a good investment on the bike. If you dropped it on a curb or something, that could put a big dent in your pipe. Fuel injection does mean at least there's no matching carburetor sort of poking a hole in your left shin, but frankly this is a styling item that's kind of bothered me about the BSA Gold Star, and I don't think it works any better here on the Triumph. The other end of the exhaust as well, I don't particularly like that. The can actually looks quite, it's quite a nicely shaped triangular can. Doesn't look too badly finished. The welding's a bit iffy there, but it's not the end of the world. But why has it got that nasty little heat shield on it? It looks like the sort of thing that you see bolted onto Chinese and Indian 125s, presumably catering for bare-legged passengers climbing on and off. Oddly enough, the Scrambler gets a slightly better looking exhaust. The shield, for some reason, possibly because it's a contrast with the black finish underneath it, on that on this machine, actually I think looks rather better, although I'm not absolutely convinced that a single cylinder needs a twin exhaust or twin outlet can. I think it's a daft styling feature. But anyway, the point is that the cat and the primary exhaust are tucked away under the engine, and given the recent commitment to exhaust manufacturers to tamper-proof systems, it'll be interesting to see just how soon aftermarket exhausts appear to actually tidy up this element of the machine. Forks on the bike are, come back to the original picture I just showed you. There it is. So they're upside down. They're apparently 43mm. They are monoshock at the rear. No word on adjustability, but I'm guessing it's only preload. No word on the manufacturer either. The Speed 400 gets a two-tone colour scheme with a sort of Triumph tank graphic. But the two bikes otherwise differ in terms of wheels, wheelbase and suspension travel. The Speed gets lightweight 17-inch wheels and road geometry and wheelbase, plus ABS equipped discs, 4-piston radial caliper gripping the 300mm disc up front. The Scrambler 400X, it's a few millimetres longer, probably due to the longer suspension travel. It also comes with a 19-inch front wheel and a 320mm front brake, rather oddly, and wider, higher grip foot pegs, which are apparently positioned to help with a standing riding style. The Scrambler X also gets sort of chunky looking Metzler Karoo street tyres though, to give that chunky off-road look whilst actually still giving you some grip on road. Interestingly, the seat height climbs on the Scrambler as well. It's a not particularly low 790 31-inch seat on the street bike, but it goes up 2 inches for the Scrambler X. You also get headlamp protection, a cast aluminium swing arm. Sorry, I've jumped 2 paragraphs here. You get headlight protection, a radiator guard, and a substantial sump guard, plus handguards and a longer front mud guard on the Scrambler X. Now, both bikes get a steel frame, both bikes get a bolt-on subframe and a cast aluminium swing arm. So my guess is that you will see more bikes coming soon using a different subframe on the rear end. I can almost guarantee a bobber with a lowered seat, and I'd be mighty surprised if we didn't see a bike aimed fairly and squarely at Royal Enfield's Himalayan. The bikes get the full package of ride-by-wire Bosch engine management, switchable traction control. I don't see riding modes though. ABS is standard, can be deactivated on the Scrambler X for off-road riding. You get an analog speedo, digital tacho, which gets fuel range remaining warning. You also get a built-in warning to see if you've left your add-on heated grips powered up, and the relatively useless presence of a gear indicator. Given the fairly limited functionality of the screen, I'm not sure why there's a handlebar mounted scroll button required, but my guess is, if anything, it's future-proofing the bike for inevitable updates, which will probably focus on the electronics package rather than anything else, perhaps adding those riding modes. Rather more useful, I'd say, is the USB-C charging socket, something a lot of Indian bikes have had, but has been missing from bikes for the European market for some time. There's a torque assist clutch to make it easier to use the clutch in stop-start riding, and it will also stop the rear wheel locking if you are clumsy on the downshifts. All LED lights, slim, i.e. difficult to see contemporary indicators. Security, the usual level of disappointment, just the easy to force steering lock and an immobilizer, which won't stop the bike being pushed away, and it won't stop somebody bypassing the transponder chip, as I explained here fairly recently. There's the usual range of genuine accessories to further empty your wallet: screen, luggage racks, tank bags, roll bags, top boxes, and rugged panniers. And one thing I did notice was an intriguingly named semi-rigid box. The use of steel, of course, does have one plus. It will help keep the price down, and one minus. Given that the petrol tanks only hold 13 litres, which is rather less than 3 gallons, the bikes aren't particularly light. Ready to ride weight is 170 kilograms, 375 pounds for the speed. The Scrambler is 9 kilograms or 20 pounds heavier, so just under 400 pounds. So those cast steel pegs must be really heavy. My old XBR was actually about 170 kilograms ready to roll, but it actually carried 20 litres of fuel, so getting on for 20 kilos in weight. So you can see the bike itself was quite a lot lighter. I see a market for lightweight aftermarket parts coming to this bike fairly soon, but they do at least get a passenger grab rail. So the bikes are going to be built at Triumph's own plant in India, and Bajaj will build their own models. 2-year warranty, and as I said last time out, they're said to offer unrivaled quality and low running costs, but I'm not convinced about the claim that the performance is class leading, because I suspect KTM would have something to do with that. Their own 390 Duke is much the same weight when fueled up, but 10% more powerful. Anyway, more on that bike in a coming show. Now, over the last 2 Sundays, as I move into the in-depth portion to finish off the show, I've taken a look at 2 different road safety campaigns. One in Warwickshire, one in Northumbria. Now, the Warwickshire Road Safety Partnership explained that they use crash hotspots to decide where to put up this summer's Think Bike and Ride Safety posters. But using a website that allowed me to pinpoint each bike crash for a decade, I looked at 2 of the roads they'd chosen. Now, the first road I looked at, which they said didn't need signs, the data from the website, which is called Collision plot. I think I called it Crashplot on a previous show. It revealed that that road had in fact had a large number of crashes involving motorcycles, mostly from bikes colliding with other vehicles. The second road that apparently did need an intervention quite clearly wasn't a road where riders fell off. They hadn't had a single fatality in a decade on that road and only one serious crash in that time. So to say I struggled with their logic was a bit of an understatement. Now the second week I looked at how Warwickshire's safety partnership had actually used their local data to declare the success of the previous year's campaign, but based on COVID numbers and the following year when traffic, it just basically didn't stack up. There was 1 year's data, and that's unacceptable in terms of trying to claim a success for anything like this. And meanwhile, Northumbria had been using national crash data to try to justify their own local poster campaigns. So there I want to head back to Rugby though, and to have a look at the area generally. Now, one of the roads I looked at was the A426, and that was one it was deemed not necessary to put a poster campaign on because, I quote, the road had average speed camera trial going on it. And what that was said to mean was that they didn't need to put the Think Bike posters up. Now, I asked 2 weeks ago why a speed camera trial would affect the look but did not see crashes that have caused most of the collisions between cars and bikes. Now, having had a few days to think on it, a more charitable alternative explanation does come to mind, that they may have decided not to run the two interventions side by side on the same roads, so that the results from one didn't confuse results from the other. And that would be fair enough. That would be a very sensible reason for not putting up the Think Bike signs. But if that's the case, why mention it as a candidate for the signs in the first place? Anyway, moving on. Let's remind ourselves of the area we were actually looking at 2 weeks back. It leads out basically from the centre of Rugby. Now, Rugby is a moderately busy town. It's not a particularly big one. It's a few miles southeast of the much larger city of Coventry. Now, it's ranked 121st in terms of population, and that makes it much the same size as Ashford in Kent, Carlisle up in the north west of the country, or Shrewsbury, which is just in the Midlands near the Welsh border. That will give you a comparison if you know any of those cities. Now, using collisionplot.co.uk, it's possible to look at a data set. You can select any single year or any combination of years from 2012 to 2021. You can select from slight, serious or fatal injuries, or any or all of them, and you can do the same with road users. You can look at pedestrians, cyclists, cars, taxis, buses, and a mysterious other category. And here, what you see, if I selected 10 years of crash data for Rugby for motorcycles only. And basically what this shows is just where crashes happen. The numbers reveal that there are multiple crashes often in the same place. So let me just sort of zoom in, if I can, on the very centre of Rugby. There we go. You should now be able to see the numbers. Each number represents the multiple of crashes which have happened in the same location. Green is a minor injury, blue is a serious injury, and you'll see that there's a big cluster of these crashes right slap bang in the middle of town. If you scroll out a little bit, you'll see that in fact the road that we were looking at, which was this one which runs up here, actually does have some clusters of crashes on it. So that is the city centre data. But look what happens if we zoom in just, whoops, that's not the one I wanted. Where's it gone? Ah, damn. Hang on, let me see if I can find the right photo. And sorry about this. I'd had this all set up and I've lost the one I wanted. No, I can't find it. I'll have to put it up in the comments at the end of the show. That's irritating, that's annoying, that's my fault for not getting that ready in time. I thought I'd done it, but obviously not. Well, when you scroll in and look at it in a little bit more detail, what you find is not entirely surprising. The town centre's obviously that real crash hotspot. One junction with 12 injuries, more or less the same place, another with 10. And when you, as I say, when you look in a little bit more detail, you find that an awful lot of the crashes happen at T-junctions. So there are almost certainly the old favourite, the Smidsey collision, the sorry mate I didn't see you crash. But another thing that sticks out when you look at the information that's attached to the crashes, you can get basic information and find out who else is involved in the crash from the free version of the program. You'll see that an awful lot of the crashes involve pedestrians in the town centre. And that really did surprise me. Now, I would say that it's easy to argue that pedestrians should be looking out for bikes before crossing the road, but if you have read your highway code, you'll know that pedestrians have precedence over powered vehicles. So really, the problem is that we need to be better looking out for them at places where they will be crossing roads. It's not just crossings like pedestrians, zebras, pelicans, puffin crossings. It's not just those kinds of crossings. If you walk down a side road and you want to be on the other side of a main road, most people will cross at the end of the side turning. It's not rocket science to work that out. Anywhere where there are junctions, people will be crossing roads. And riders do need to look for these pedestrians, because not only because the pedestrian gets hurt in a collision, riders don't always come out of these collisions well. At least one of the crashes on the edge of the town centre happened involving a rider, a pedestrian, and a car, and it ended up fatal for the motorcyclist. So that's the surprising and possibly scary point that's come out of that in-depth investigation that I've been doing into the crashes that I can see on Collisionplot. There are more riders colliding with pedestrians than I had expected. It's certainly not a something that I believe is flagged up well enough for riders. I think we really need to rethink ourselves, our strategies for riding in busy city centres, and keep a much better lookout for pedestrians. Can't give you any more details on those crashes because I can't play the fee for accessing it, but if you want to go and find it and have a look at it yourself, it's collisionplot.co.uk. Collisionplot.co.uk. I'll put the link up for you in just a moment. Right, okay, so I'll be taking one final look at the data next week, and I'll be highlighting another area where there are a seriously scary number of motorcycle crashes, and I'll be looking firstly again at that road, the A426 out of Rugby, to show you that the collisions on that road weren't where I expected to find them. And then secondly, I'll be looking at some of the other places similar to that road which also turn out to have really, really high levels of motorcycle collisions with other vehicles, and those are roundabouts. So that's next Sunday. Come along on next Sunday and I'll take a final look at this data. Right, so that is it for today. Thank you very much again for looking in. Sorry for the slight confusion over the data there and the photo that I wanted to show you. I will pop that up probably tomorrow actually, because I will use this data for a post on Facebook. So yeah, thanks again for looking in. If you are out there on the bike today, enjoy your ride. Remember, the weather will turn a bit rough the further northwest you go, and could be windy and stormy and potentially very wet indeed, but if you are out there on the bike, stay shiny side up.